The European economy, GDP. Three letters that get thrown around a lot, usually by quite smug finance people. But here is what it actually means. It means gross domestic product, the size of an economy. Everything we produce, every good, every service, every transaction, every espresso, every train ticket, every Volkswagen added up over a year. Now, is this a perfect measure on how well a country is doing? No, not at all. It doesn't capture how happy you are, it doesn't count the work your mom did raising you, it doesn't subtract for stress or pollution, but it does tell us something important. It tells us where we collectively are putting our time. Because money is exactly that, it's just stored work, and every euro is somebody somewhere doing something. And the European economy is roughly 18 trillion euros, one of the biggest single markets on the planet, 450 million people in it. But here I want to play a trick, because it's difficult to get a grasp of that size. Imagine the EU economy as a calendar year, all 365 days, January to December. And let's split those 18 trillion euros into days so we can actually see in time how much of our year goes into making cars, versus paying nurses, versus building factories, and where does our European economy year actually go? We'll start with the chunk that defines Europe, and it's quite a lot bigger than people realize. Making and building things. Factories, manufacturing, construction combined, cars, chemicals, machinery, the buildings going up across Warsaw and Paris. Together, almost a quarter of the entire economy, or 88 days a year, goes into this bucket. Nearly 3 solid months of Europeans producing stuff. This cliché about Europe being a museum is simply wrong. It is still the workshop of the world, but we are just a bit more quiet about it. Next, I want to discuss 3 big buckets, all roughly the same size, around 19% each, 69 days apiece. First up, trade, transport and hospitality. Moving things, serving things, wholesale, retail, logistics, restaurants and hotels. Secondly, and this is a very European thing, the public services bundle. Public administration, defense, education, healthcare and social work all roll into one. This means every teacher, nurse, civil servant, soldiers and so forth. This is what makes Europe Europe. Thirdly, the brains and money bucket. Here we put professional services, finance, insurance and tech combined. We're also putting in our lawyers, consultants, accountants, banks, software, telecoms. About 22% of the economy, or 80 days a year, comprises of this. And then lastly, housing. Real estate, rentals and leasing, around 11% a year, or 40 days a year. Smaller than the US because European rents are generally lower relative to incomes than in the US. And after that we have everything else. Agriculture, feeding 450 million people. The arts, Eurovision, plus a handful of smaller sectors, all bundled together the remaining 4 to 5 weeks of the year. So these are the 365 days, all accounted for. But here might be the more interesting cut. Forget about industries. Just look at what the Europeans is actually spending their money on. If you look at healthcare, all in all, doctors, drug, hospital, everything. Around 10% of our combined GDP, around 36 days a year. This is then 5 weeks, and quite a lot less than what the Americans are spending on this, which are spending 66 days a year. Which means that the European is spending roughly half the amount of share on the healthcare and is actually getting better results. Longer lives, lower infant mortality rates, and almost zero medical bankruptcy. Now this gap isn't small, it's structural. Next up, education. This is something we spend around 5% a year on, around 18 days. A bit less than the US in raw GDP terms, but with free universities in most countries, so the actual numbers per student tell a very different story. And then, the headline of the decade. Defense. For most of the post-Cold War period, Europe spent roughly 1.5% of its GDP on its militaries, roughly 5 days a year. That was when most Europeans assumed history was over. And well, history wasn't over. So in 2024, EU defense spending actually increased to roughly 1.9%. In 2025, up to 2.1%. And now most NATO members in Europe are now committed to spend up to 3.5% of its GDP on its military over the next decades. In Germany, it will be 3.2% by 2029, and in Poland, they are planning to spend 4.5% in 2029. This means that Europe is adding several days of its working year on defense every year, the largest peacetime rearmament in 3 generations. So that is the shape of the European economy. More factories than you think. A massive public sector bundle, half the healthcare cost of America for better results, and a defense budget that, for the first time since the 1950s, is actually sharply going up. But that raises a much bigger question though. Is all this money well spent? Should Europe be spending more on defense? Or are we being scared into it? Should we instead spend more on schools, more on housing, or maybe even more on research? Europe is currently spending half the amount of the US is spending on its healthcare, but is achieving better results. So clearly, spending more on something doesn't always mean you get more of it. When we are counting a traffic jam as growth, a flood cleanup as growth, a lawyer's fee as growth, are we really measuring the right thing? Is there such a thing as wasteful GDP, or are all GDP created equal? In our upcoming video, we will examine exactly this, and also figure out what is actually making a country richer, and is there a better way to measure how we're really doing? I'll see you then.